Brendan the Bully and the breaking news. There are some days that you never ever want to forget, like birthdays and school trip days and adventure days. And there are other days when you want to forget everything that ever happened. Like when a bully bullies you, or a grown-up tells you off for doing something you didn't do, or when someone you love most in the world suddenly dies. And then there are roller coaster days. Those are days when one moment you're so happy that you feel like it's your birthday, but then the next you feel so sad that you want to die, that you want to hide in your bed until everything is over. That Friday, the day after we had learned about the worldwide whispers, was a roller coaster day. After the morning register, Mrs. Khan suddenly told everyone to leave their things on their desks because we had to go to an emergency school assembly. We only ever have an emergency assembly if something bad has happened, like a fight or if something's been stolen from a teacher. But Josie clapped her hands and asked, "Do you think they've found Ahmed's parents already?" That made my heart leap up and feel like it was flying. Maybe the emergency assembly was for that. So I looked over at Ahmed and gave him an excited wave. But the assembly wasn't for that at all. Mrs. Anders only wanted to tell everyone to be on their best behavior, even the teachers, because the reporters surrounding the school were clearly not going anywhere anytime soon and had put the school firmly on the world's radar. Hearing this made everyone sit up straight, just in case there was giant radar being beamed down from outer space to spy on us. Then Mrs. Sanders said that if anyone spoke to a reporter about me or Tom or Ahmed or asked us any questions about what had happened, the police would know and they might be expelled. This made everyone turn around and stare at us, and I could hear Jenny saying loudly, "See, told you it was true, they did break into the Queen's house." And someone else replied, "They should have worn a mask, then they wouldn't have been caught." But we didn't mind. And Josie and Tom even started acting like famous people and began waving at everyone. But as we were leaving the assembly hall, Brendan the Bully pushed past us and whispered, "Smelly refuge bag," at Ahmed. And Chris and Liam punched their fists into their hands, which meant they were going to beat us up. I thought we should tell Mrs. Khan and Mrs. Sanders right away, but Ahmed told me not to. He said bullies that just talk are better than bullies that actually punch because words don't hurt as much. I don't agree. Dad always used to say that words can hurt more than punches because when you get a bruise or a bump after being punched, it disappears after a while and you can forget all about it. But words can stick around for a long time, and the meanest words stick around the longest. Tom didn't think Ahmed was right either and said we should pull down Brendan the Bully's pants in PE. Josie thought we should save up all our pocket money and pay one of the bigger bullies to bully him for us. But then Michael said that bullying a bully was silly and that we should just ignore him. So that's what we all agreed to do. Except we couldn't. Because at first break, Brendan the Bully started to do something which made me hate him more than anything I had ever hated in my whole life. Even Beetroot and Mr. Idens. Mrs. Khan says we should never ever hate anyone because hating someone can eat up your insides and gives you heart disease. But sometimes you can't help it. And I especially couldn't help it when I heard Brendan the Bully and Liam and Chris singing the song they had made up. The song went like this: "Ahmed the refugee smells like poo, so we're gonna stuff him in a bag and flush him down the loo." I got so angry that as soon as I heard it, I shouted at them to shut up and leave Ahmed alone, and so did Michael and Josie and Tom. But that only made them singing louder and louder and louder, which made Ahmed's face get redder and redder. I looked around for the teacher to tell, but Mr. Irons was the only teacher I could see on duty, and I could see right away that he had heard Brendan the Bully's song too, and wasn't going to do anything about it. He just stood and watched us with his nose in the air. By the time Brendan the bully had begun to sing the song for the fourth time, I think all of us had forgotten what Mrs. Sanders had said about everyone being on their best behaviour and the giant raider, and about there being lots of reporters everywhere. Because suddenly, without even thinking about it, I made a running lunge for Brendan the bully, and Tom and Josie and Michael did the same. We all crashed into each other and, falling to the floor, began punching and kicking Brendan the bully and Liam and Chris just as hard as we could. I think I must have been punched and kicked back too, but I was so angry I couldn't feel anything. Ahmed stood frozen to the floor and watched us, not knowing what to do, but after a few seconds he roared and, jumping on top of Brendan the bully, began to hit him as hard as he could too. The fight didn't last for more than a minute, because a few seconds after we had all fallen to the floor, we could hear a whistle hurrying our way and clicking noises like camera buttons being pressed, as lots of pairs of hands started to pull us away. We were marched into school and up the stairs, and next thing I knew, we were all standing in Mrs. Sanders' office, being stared at angrily by not only Mrs. Sanders, but Mrs. Cann and Miss Hempsey too. I couldn't really hear what they were saying because my ears had become so hot, but I think I heard the words ashamed, never in the history of the school, and parents being said. We all got a detention for fighting, even Ahmed. But it wasn't all bad. When my ears had cooled down, Josie told me that when Mrs. Sanders had heard Brendan the bully's song, she had given him and Liam and Chris 2 weeks detention and said she would be calling their parents too. But as it turned out, Brendan the bully's punishment was more serious than even we could have imagined, because by that very evening, Brendan the bully and Mr. Idens were breaking the news. On every single channel and in all the weekend papers, headlines like "Video of bully attacking refugee boy sparks outrage," and "Teacher stands aside as the school bully threatens refugee boy," and "School bully trash talks refugee child," were everywhere. So that by Monday morning, the school was surrounded by even more cameras and reporters and vans with satellite dishes on the roofs than before. Brendan the bully and Liam and Chris didn't come into school for 3 whole days after they had broken the news, and when they did, their parents came with them and made them apologize to Ahmed in front of everyone at morning assembly. They still had to do detention every day for 2 weeks too. It made everyone glad they had been caught by the news people. Brendan the bully still looked at Ahmed with a horrible scowl on his face whenever he thought no one could see him, and one time in the lunch hall he walked right up to Ahmed with his fist clenched as if he wanted to punch him. But instead of being scared, Ahmed just looked at him with his lion eyes and grinned. After that, Brendan the bully never went near Ahmed again. And just when we thought things couldn't get any better, that week Mr. Idens and his whistling nose disappeared too and were never heard of ever again. Boring Mrs. Stevens had to take over his class, which probably made them just as miserable as they had been before. But no one else really cared about that, because now everyone was free to scream and laugh and shout as much as they wanted to at break times again. So we did. Except we all screamed and laughed and shouted louder and longer and harder than we had ever done before. Because when you're playing with your friends and don't have any bullies to worry about anymore, that's exactly what you should be doing.